Jasper Vaughn sat at his sleek glass desk on the top floor of Skytech, a towering tech empire in the heart of New York City. At 32, he was the youngest CEO the company had ever seen, with sharp blue eyes and a jawline that could cut glass. But beneath his polished suits and confident smirk lay a secret that made him the talk of the corporate world. Jasper was allergic to women. Not in some metaphorical sense, no, his body literally rebelled at their touch. A brush of a hand, a pat on the shoulder, and he'd be out cold, sprawled across the floor like a Victorian damsel. It was absurd, humiliating, and completely incurable, or so the doctors said. Today, that secret was about to ruin his morning. The meeting started like any other. Jasper leaned back in his chair, scanning reports on his tablet, while his team buzzed around the conference table. Then it happened. A junior marketing exec named Rachel stepped too close, her fingers grazing his arm as she handed him a file. The room spun, his vision blurred. Before he could mutter an excuse, Jasper slumped forward, forehead smacking the table with a dull thud. Gasps filled the air. Someone yelled for water, another fumbled for a phone. Rachel froze, wide-eyed, as if she'd just committed a crime. Minutes later, Jasper came to, sprawled on the carpet, a cold towel pressed to his neck. His assistant hovered over him, a wiry guy who'd quit last week after calling the job a freak show. Jasper couldn't blame him. He needed a replacement fast, and it had to be a man, no exceptions. Enter Reese Dalton. She stood in the doorway of Jasper's office later that day, dressed in a loose blazer and slacks, her dark hair tucked under a baseball cap. At 25, she was desperate. Her twin brother Grayson had landed the assistant gig at Skytech, a cushy $50,000 a month job that could pay for their nephew Finn's medical bills. But Grayson was bedridden with a brutal flu, coughing up a lung in their cramped Brooklyn apartment. He'd begged Reese to take his place, just for a while. She'd hesitated, forging his ID, faking his voice, binding her chest flat. It was insane. But Finn needed treatment, and Reese couldn't say no. So here she was, palms sweaty, pretending to be Grayson Dalton, the new guy at Skytech. Jasper looked up from his desk, sizing her up. She was shorter than most guys he'd hired, with a slim build and nervous energy. Something about her felt off, but he shrugged it away. He stood, extending a hand. Reese froze. Touching him was a death sentence for her cover. She'd read the job posting, male assistant required due to CEO's condition. If he passed out now, she'd be toast. But Jasper waited, hand outstretched, his gaze steady. No turning back. Reese grabbed his hand, bracing for chaos. Nothing happened. Jasper's grip was firm, his expression calm. He didn't collapse. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he grinned, a rare flash of warmth breaking through his usual cool facade. "Steady handshake for a newbie," he said, clapping her shoulder. Reese nearly jumped out of her skin, but she nodded, muttering a gruff thanks. Her heart pounded. Why wasn't he reacting? Was her disguise that good? Or was something else at play? The first meeting, as Jasper's assistant, came an hour later. Reese followed him into the boardroom, clutching a stack of files like a lifeline. Skytech's latest project, a cloud security platform, dominated the discussion. Jasper paced, tossing out ideas, while Reese scrambled to keep up. Then disaster struck. A pen slipped from her hand, rolling under the table. She ducked down to grab it, and her cap brushed Jasper's leg. He paused mid-sentence, glancing down. Reese shot up, face burning, expecting the worst, but Jasper just chuckled, picking up where he left off. She exhaled, shaky. Maybe she could pull this off. Maybe he didn't notice the faint curve of her jaw or the way her voice cracked when she spoke too fast. Across town, Serena Langley lounged in her penthouse, sipping a martini and scrolling through her phone. At 27, she was the darling of New York's elite, daughter of Preston Langley, a real estate mogul with more money than morals. Her platinum blonde hair gleamed under the chandelier light, and her green eyes narrowed at a photo of Jasper Vaughn. She'd wanted him since college, his power, his name, his everything. The allergy thing was a hiccup, sure, but Serena didn't care. She'd find a way around it. Skytech was her ticket to the top, and Jasper was the prize. Then she saw it, a company memo about his new assistant, Grayson Dalton. The name rang a bell, a faint, bitter memory from her childhood. She tapped her manicured nails on the glass, frowning. Dalton. It couldn't be them, could it? Back at SkyTech, Jasper leaned against his office window, watching the city skyline glow in the dusk. Reese hovered nearby, organizing his schedule. She was good, quick, efficient, better than the last guy, but that handshake stuck with him. He hadn't felt a jolt, no dizziness, nothing. 5 years running this company, and every woman who'd brushed past him had sent him crashing. Not Grayson. Jasper rubbed his temple, puzzled. Maybe the allergy was fading. Maybe he was imagining it. Or maybe, just maybe, this new assistant was hiding something big. Serena's suspicions grew as she dug into the Dalton name. A call to an old family friend confirmed it. Grayson and Reese Dalton were her half-siblings, born to Preston's first wife, a woman he'd cheated on and abandoned decades ago. Serena's mother had taken over after that, raising her as the golden child while the Daltons faded into obscurity. Now one of them was cozying up to Jasper. She smirked, tossing her phone aside. If Grayson thought he could waltz into SkyTech and steal her future, he was dead wrong. She'd unmask him, ruin him, and make sure Jasper never looked his way again. This was war, and Serena Langley didn't lose. Reese left the office that night, cap pulled low, heart racing. She'd survived day one, but Jasper's steady gaze lingered in her mind. He didn't collapse, he didn't suspect, yet every step felt like a tightrope walk. Finn needed her to keep this job, and Grayson needed her to stay sharp, but Serena's shadow loomed, a threat she couldn't see coming. New York's lights glittered below as Reese boarded the subway home, whispering to herself, "I can do this," she had to. For her family, for Finn, and maybe, though she'd never admit it, for the strange, quiet thrill of standing next to Jasper Vaughn. Reese Dalton stepped into the SkyTech lobby the next morning, her stomach twisting into knots. Day 2 on the job, and she already felt like a fraud teetering on the edge of exposure. Her brother Grayson's ID badge hung heavy around her neck, a lifeline to the $50,000 salary that could save their nephew Finn. She adjusted her cap, tugging it lower over her eyes, and rehearsed her low-pitched Grayson voice in her head. Just keep it together, she told herself, weaving through the bustling crowd of suits and coffee cups. Jasper Vaughn needed her, or at least he needed Grayson, and she wasn't about to let Finn down. Upstairs, Jasper sat in his office, flipping through a stack of reports. His new assistant had impressed him yesterday. Sharp, organized, a little jumpy maybe, but solid. That handshake still nagged at him, though. No reaction, no blackout, nothing. He'd spent years dodging women like landmines, perfecting the art of the sidestep and the polite nod. Yet Grayson Dalton strolled in, shook his hand, and the world didn't tilt. Jasper frowned, tapping his pen against the desk. He needed answers. A quick call to his doctor later that morning confirmed it. The allergy was congenital, baked into his DNA since birth. But the doc added a twist. "There's one person out there you don't react to, Jasper. A genetic fluke, a needle in a haystack." Jasper hung up, staring at the ceiling. Could it be Grayson? Ridiculous. He shook it off and buzzed Reese in with a stack of files. Reese barely had time to settle when Serena Langley stormed into SkyTech like a hurricane in heels. She'd spent the night digging into the Dalton twins, and the truth burned in her chest. Grayson and Reese were her half-siblings, the unwanted leftovers of her father Preston's first marriage. She remembered them vaguely from childhood, 2 scrappy kids at a park, begging for a soccer ball she'd snatched just to spite them. Now Grayson was here, infiltrating her world, cozying up to Jasper. Serena's lips curled into a smirk as she strode past the receptionist, demanding to see the CEO. She'd expose this imposter, ruin him, and secure Jasper for herself. Jasper greeted Serena with a tight smile, his usual charm tempered by wariness. She was a regular fixture at SkyTech, always pitching some merger or partnership between her father's real estate empire and his tech kingdom. Today, though, she bypassed the small talk, her green eyes glinting with purpose. "I hear you've got a new assistant," she said, voice syrupy sweet. Jasper nodded, gesturing to Reese, who hovered near the door with a notepad. Serena's gaze locked onto her, sharp and predatory. "Nice to meet you, Grayson," she purred, stepping closer. Reese stiffened, clutching the notepad like a shield. Serena's perfume hit her nose, floral and overpowering, a warning shot. "Pleasure's mine," Reese muttered, keeping her tone gruff. The tension snapped when Serena made her move. She reached out, pretending to adjust Reese's tie, her fingers brushing the collar. Reese jerked back, heart slamming against her ribs. If Jasper saw this, if he reacted, it was over. But Jasper just watched, brow furrowed, no sign of collapse. Serena's smile faltered, then hardened. She pivoted to Jasper, all business. "I've got a proposal for you," she said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Preston Langley wants SkyTech to partner on a new data center." Jasper skimmed it, unimpressed. "We'll see," he said, handing it to Reese. "File this for me, Grayson." Reese nodded, bolting for the safety of the filing cabinet, her pulse still racing. Later that day, disaster struck in the break room. Reese needed coffee, a jolt to steady her nerves after Serena's ambush. She grabbed a mug, turned, and nearly crashed into Jasper. He caught her arm to steady her, his hand firm against her sleeve. She braced for the worst, but he stayed upright, unfazed. "Sorry, boss," she mumbled, stepping back. Jasper grinned. No harm done. He poured himself a cup, chatting about the weather, oblivious to the chaos in Reese's head. Why wasn't he reacting? She fled to the bathroom, splashing water on her face, staring at her reflection. The cap hid her hair, the binder flattened her chest, but her eyes, wide and panicked, screamed the truth. She couldn't keep this up forever. Serena wasn't done. That evening, she cornered Reese at a company mixer in the SkyTech lounge. The room buzzed with chatter, clinking glasses, and soft jazz from a speaker. Jasper mingled with execs across the floor, leaving Reese to fend for herself. Serena sidled up, a glass of wine in hand, her smile venomous. "You're good at this assistant thing, Grayson," she said, loud enough for nearby colleagues to hear. "Bet you're great at other stuff, too." She winked, then called out to a group of women by the bar. "Hey, ladies, why don't you give Grayson here a little test? Kiss him, see if he's got game." The women laughed, drifting closer. Reese's stomach dropped. If they touched her, if Jasper saw, the whole charade would collapse. Thinking fast, Reese grabbed a bottle of wine from a table, holding it up like a trophy. "How about I pour instead?" she said, voice cracking. She splashed wine into glasses, dodging hands and giggles until a friend from accounting, Tara, swooped in. "Back off, girls," she said, looping an arm around Reese. "He's taken." Tara winked at Reese, a silent lifeline. Serena scowled, thwarted, but her wheels were already turning. She'd seen the panic in Grayson's eyes. Something wasn't right, and she'd prove it. Jasper watched the scene from afar, sipping a soda, his curiosity growing. Grayson had dodged those women like a pro, but there was a tremor in his stance, a flicker of fear. Jasper's mind drifted to 5 years ago, a night that haunted him still. He'd been at the Grand Manhattan for a company gala, celebrating SkyTech's first big win. Someone slipped something into his drink, a bitter edge he hadn't noticed until too late. He woke up in room 2606, head pounding, clothes askew, a woman's bracelet on his wrist, silver with a tiny star charm. No memory of her face, just a vague warmth, a whisper of safety. He'd kept the bracelet in his desk drawer ever since, a puzzle he couldn't solve. Could Grayson know something about that night? No, impossible. Jasper shook his head, dismissing the thought. Reese escaped the mixer, collapsing into a stairwell to catch her breath. Tara's save had bought her time, but Serena was relentless. Reese's phone buzzed. A text from Grayson. "How's it going?" he asked. She typed back. "Surviving, barely. Finn okay?" Grayson replied. "He's stable, thanks to you. Keep it up, sis." Reese smiled, pocketing the phone. Finn was worth it. Every lie, every close call. But Serena's shadow loomed larger now, a threat tied to a past Reese barely remembered. She'd been 6 when Preston Langley walked out, leaving her mom with 2 kids and a broken heart. Serena had been the golden girl, the one who got everything. Now she wanted Jasper too, and Reese was in her way. The next morning, Jasper called his doctor again, pushing for more answers. Congenital allergy, yes, but this exception, this one person, how do I find them? He asked. The doc chuckled. You'll know when you don't hit the floor, Jasper. He hung up, staring at Reese across the office as she sorted mail. She caught his eye, offered a shaky grin, and went back to work. Jasper rubbed the bracelet in his pocket, the star charm cool against his fingers. 5 years ago, someone had slipped past his defenses. Maybe it was time to figure out who. Serena, meanwhile, hatched a new plan. She'd get proof, hard evidence that Grayson wasn't what he seemed. She remembered a trick from high school, catching a rival in the bathroom, snapping a photo to humiliate them. If Grayson was hiding something, she'd catch him off guard. She booked a meeting with Jasper for the next day, making sure Reese would be there. The SkyTech ladies' room would be her trap. Serena smiled into her mirror, brushing her hair. Grayson Dalton, or whoever you are, she thought. You're done. Reese sensed the storm coming. She'd dodged Serena once, but the woman was a bloodhound, sniffing out weakness. As she left SkyTech that night, the city lights blurred through her tired eyes. Jasper's steady presence, Serena's piercing stare, the weight of Finn's future, it all pressed down on her. She whispered to herself, one more day, just one more day. But deep down, she knew the tightrope was fraying and the fall was coming fast. Reese Dalton arrived at SkyTech the next morning with a pit in her stomach. The air felt thick, charged with the promise of trouble. She'd barely slept, replaying Serena Langley's smirk from the mixer, the way her eyes had lingered like she'd already won. Reese adjusted her cap, smoothed her blazer, and headed to Jasper Vaughn's office. He was there, hunched over his laptop, the silver bracelet with the star charm glinting on his desk. She'd noticed it before, a quiet mystery he never explained. Today, though, his gaze was sharper, more searching, as he waved her in. "Morning, Grayson," he said, voice casual but edged with something new. Reese nodded, setting down his coffee. "Morning, boss." She kept her head low, praying he didn't see the tremble in her hands. Serena swept in minutes later, all confidence and calculated charm. She wore a tailored red dress, her blonde hair cascading in perfect waves, and carried a leather portfolio she didn't bother to open. "Jasper," she said, leaning against his desk. "I've got a proposition you can't refuse." He raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Reese hovered near the filing cabinet, pretending to sort papers, her ears straining. Serena's voice dropped, conspiratorial. "Your assistant, Grayson? He's not what he seems. I've got proof." Jasper's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, gesturing for her to continue. Serena smirked, glancing at Reese. "Let's just say he's got secrets that could tank SkyTech's reputation. Meet me in the lounge at noon, and I'll show you." Reese's heart thudded so loud she swore they could hear it. She mumbled an excuse about emails and slipped out, racing to the bathroom to splash water on her face. Serena knew something, or thought she did. The disguise had held so far, but every dodge, every lie, was pushing her closer to the edge. She stared at her reflection, the cap shadowing her eyes, the binder pinching her ribs. Finn needed this job. Grayson needed her to hold it together, but Serena was a wrecking ball and Reese was running out of moves. She texted Grayson from a stall, fingers shaking. "Serena's on to me. What do I do?" His reply came fast. "Stall her. I'm feeling better, can switch back soon." Reese exhaled, pocketing the phone. Soon wasn't now, and now was all she had. At noon, the SkyTech lounge buzzed with execs grabbing lunch. Jasper arrived, hands in his pockets, his calm exterior masking a growing unease. Serena waited by a window, a tablet in hand, her smile triumphant. Reese trailed behind, keeping her distance, every nerve on fire. Serena tapped the screen, pulling up a grainy photo from the mixer. Reese dodging those women with a bottle of wine. "Look at him, Jasper," she said, zooming in. "Scared of a little flirt. Doesn't that strike you as odd?" Jasper studied the image, his brow furrowing. "He's shy," he said, shrugging. "Not everyone's a social butterfly, Serena." She laughed, sharp and cold. "Shy or hiding. I saw him flinch when I got close yesterday. He's no man, Jasper. He's a fraud. Before Jasper could respond, Serena's trap sprang. She'd timed it perfectly, a group of female staffers passing by with trays of coffee. She grabbed one, a bubbly intern named Kelly, and pushed her toward Reese. "Give Grayson a hug," she said, loud enough to draw eyes. "He's been so helpful lately." Kelly grinned, oblivious, and lunged for a friendly squeeze. Reese sidestepped, nearly tripping over a chair, her cap slipping. "Sorry, I'm, germophobic," she stammered, righting herself. The room chuckled, but Serena's eyes narrowed. Jasper watched, silent, his mind ticking. Reese bolted for the hallway, muttering about a call, her pulse hammering. She'd dodged another bullet, but the graze felt fatal. Serena didn't let up. That afternoon she escalated, cornering Reese in the office after Jasper stepped out for a meeting. She blocked the door, arms crossed, her voice low and venomous. "I know who you are, Reese Dalton," she hissed. "You and Grayson think you can waltz in here, take what's mine? I'll bury you both." Reese froze, the name hitting like a slap. How did Serena know? She forced a laugh, gruff and unsteady. "You've got the wrong guy, lady." "I'm Grayson." Serena stepped closer, her perfume choking the air. "Prove it then, drop the act. Or I'll drag you to Jasper myself." Reese's mind raced. She needed an out, now. Fate intervened. Grayson burst through the door, pale but upright, his flu finally breaking. He'd caught Reese's text, hauled himself out of bed, and cabbed it to Skytech. "Sis," he said, grabbing her arm, "we're done here." Serena blinked, confused, as Grayson pulled Reese into the hall. They ducked into a stairwell, panting. "You okay?" he asked, checking her over. Reese nodded, breathless. "She's got my name, Gray. She knows." Grayson cursed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll take over tomorrow. You've done enough." Reese shook her head. "Not yet. Finn's next treatment's due. I can handle her." Grayson sighed, but didn't argue. He knew that look in her eyes, stubborn as steel. The real storm hit 2 days later. Serena went nuclear, hiring a pair of goons to snatch Reese after work. They grabbed her outside Skytech, shoving her into a black van as dusk settled over the city. She fought, kicking and clawing, but a cloth pressed to her face sent her under. She woke in a warehouse, wrists bound, Serena looming over her in a black coat. "Jasper's mine," Serena said, pacing. "Agree to leave Skytech, or you don't leave here." Reese glared, defiant. "You're insane. He'll never want you." Serena slapped her, the sting sharp, but before she could do more, Grayson crashed in. He'd tracked Reese's phone, a trick he'd learned from a coder friend. He tackled one goon, Reese tripped the other, and they bolted, leaving Serena screaming into the dark. Jasper got wind of it the next day. A security guard tipped him off, vague whispers of a van and a fight. He cornered Reese in his office, eyes blazing. "What happened last night, Grayson?" he demanded. Reese swallowed, sticking to half-truths. "Just a misunderstanding, boss. Got jumped, got away." Jasper didn't buy it, but he let it slide, his focus shifting. He'd seen Finn the day before, dropping files at Grayson's apartment for Reese to sign. The kid had run up, hugging his leg, then collapsed, wheezing, allergic to a neighbor lady passing by. Jasper had carried him inside, stunned. Finn's blood type, Rh negative, matched his own rare strain, and that bracelet? Finn wore one just like it, a star charm dangling from his tiny wrist. Suspicion crystallized. Jasper called in a favor, pulling security footage from the Grand Manhattan 5 years back, the night he'd been drugged. Room 2606, the bracelet left behind. He watched the grainy tape alone, heart pounding, as a woman slipped out of his room, dark hair tucked under a hood. She dropped something, the bracelet, and vanished. He couldn't see her face, but the pieces clicked. Finn, the allergy, the blood type, Grayson's odd immunity. It wasn't Grayson, it was her. Serena pushed her endgame that weekend, announcing a wedding to Jasper at a glitzy Skytech gala. She'd worn him down with threats, claiming she'd sue Skytech for some fabricated breach unless he agreed. Jasper played along, biding time, the footage burning a hole in his pocket. Reese showed up, cap swapped for a borrowed suit, crashing the event with Grayson. Serena strutted down the aisle, radiant in white, until Jasper stepped to the mic. He cued the video projected on a massive screen. The crowd gasped as Serena's younger self appeared, spiking his drink 5 years ago, dragging him to 2606, a failed seduction turned chaos. She'd faked it all, the connection, the immunity, using heavy perfume to mask his reaction. Serena lunged for the projector, shrieking, but security grabbed her. Jasper turned to Reese, voice steady. "You're her, aren't you? The woman from that night." Reese froze, caught. Grayson stepped forward, confessing. "She's Reese, my sister. She took my place for Finn." Jasper's eyes softened, piecing it together. "Finn's my son," he said, not a question. Reese nodded, tears brimming. 5 years ago, a gala, a spiked drink, a blurry night. She'd woken beside him, scared, and fled, leaving the bracelet her mom had given her. Jasper pulled the matching one from his pocket, holding it out. "I've been looking for you." The gala dissolved into chaos. Cops arrived, cuffing Serena for the kidnapping. Preston Langley stormed in, blustering, but Jasper shut him down. "Your daughter's done," he said, cold. "So's your deal with Skytech." Reese stood beside him, dazed as the truth sank in. Finn was theirs, a secret born from a night neither fully remembered, now binding them in a way neither expected. Jasper took her hand, steady, no collapse, no fear. For the first time, Reese didn't pull away. The gala hall at Skytech stood in stunned silence as Serena Langley was dragged away in handcuffs, her white gown trailing behind her like a defeated flag. The video of her spiking Jasper Vaughn's drink 5 years ago looped on the massive screen, a damning echo of her lies. Preston Langley lingered near the exit, his face red with fury, shouting empty threats about lawsuits and revenge. Jasper ignored him, his focus locked on Reese Dalton, who stood trembling beside her brother Grayson. The crowd murmured, piecing together the chaos, but Jasper didn't care about their whispers. He stepped closer to Reese, the silver bracelet with the star charm dangling from his hand, its twin still on her wrist from that night, long ago. Reese's breath caught as Jasper stopped in front of her, his blue eyes steady, unguarded for the first time. "You're her," he said again, softer now, a statement wrapped in wonder. "The woman from the Grand Manhattan, room 2606. Finn's mother." "My son." Reese swallowed, her throat tight. She'd spent weeks hiding, lying, running from this moment, but there was no escaping it now. Grayson squeezed her shoulder, a silent nudge to speak. "Yes," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "It was me. 5 years ago, I was at that gala, a temp waitress. Someone spiked your drink and mine too, I think. I woke up next to you, scared out of my mind. I ran, left the bracelet. I didn't know about Finn until months later." Jasper listened, his expression shifting from shock to something deeper, a quiet ache. He'd spent years chasing a ghost, a fleeting memory of warmth from that blurry night. The bracelet had been his only clue, tucked in his drawer like a lifeline. Now here she was, Reese, not Grayson, the one who'd slipped past his allergy, past his walls. He took her hand, his grip firm but gentle, and she didn't pull away. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, searching her face. Reese's eyes glistened, a tear slipping free. "I didn't know it was you, not at first. Then I got the job, saw the bracelet, but I couldn't risk Finn's treatment. I thought you'd fire me, hate me for lying." Jasper shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Hate you? Reese, you're the only person I've touched in years without hitting the floor. You think I'd let that go?" The crowd around them faded, their stares irrelevant. He stepped closer, voice dropping. "I've been looking for you not just because of Finn, but because that night stuck with me. I didn't know why until now." Reese blinked, caught off guard. "You don't even remember it," she said, half laughing through her tears. Jasper shrugged, his grin widening. "I remember enough. You're here now. That's what matters." Grayson cleared his throat, breaking the moment. Boss," he said, stepping forward. "Maybe save the mushy stuff for later. We've got a room full of people and a kid who needs you both." Jasper chuckled, glancing at him. "You're fired, Grayson," he said, deadpan, then softened. "Kidding. You're back on tomorrow." Grayson smirked, relieved, and nudged Reese again. "Go on, sis. Finn's waiting." Reese hesitated, then nodded, letting Jasper lead her toward the stage where the wedding setup still stood, abandoned mid-ceremony. The officiant, a wiry man in a black suit, lingered awkwardly by the altar, unsure what to do after Serena's dramatic exit. Jasper waved him over, his mind racing with a sudden, reckless idea. "Hey," he said, grabbing the mic from the podium. "Everyone still here? Good. Let's flip this night around." He turned to Reese, holding out the bracelet. "Reese Dalton, I've spent 5 years chasing a mystery, and it's you. Finn's ours, and I'm not letting you walk away again. Marry me, right here, right now." The crowd gasped, then cheered, a wave of noise crashing over them. Reese's jaw dropped, her cap long gone, dark hair spilling free. "You're serious?" she asked, incredulous. Jasper grinned, slipping the bracelet onto her wrist, where it clicked against its twin. "Dead serious. I've got a ring in my office, but this'll do for now. Say yes, Reese." She laughed, shaky and bright, the weight of weeks lifting. "Yes, you lunatic." Yes, the officiant scrambled to catch up, fumbling with his book as Jasper pulled Reese close, their hands clasped tight. The vows were quick, simple, a promise forged in the chaos of the night. "Do you, Jasper Vaughn, take Reese Dalton to be your wife?" "I do," he said, unwavering. "And you, Reese Dalton, take Jasper Vaughn to be your husband?" "I do," she replied, her voice steady at last. The officiant beamed. "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you married. Kiss her, man, before someone else crashes this thing." Jasper didn't hesitate. He cupped Reese's face, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt like coming home. No dizziness, no collapse, just her, warm and real against him. The crowd erupted, clapping and whistling, as Grayson whooped from the sidelines. Reese pulled back, breathless, a grin splitting her face. "You're insane," she whispered. Jasper winked. "You're stuck with me now." They turned to the audience, hands raised, the bracelets catching the light, a matched pair finally reunited. Hours later, the gala wound down, guests drifting out into the New York night. Jasper and Reese slipped away to her apartment in Brooklyn, where Grayson waited with Finn. The 4-year-old sat on the couch, clutching a toy truck, his dark hair a mirror of Jasper's. He'd been stable since his last episode, but the sight of him hit Jasper hard. Finn looked up, curious, as Reese knelt beside him. "Hey, buddy," she said, brushing his bangs back. "This is Jasper. He's, your dad?" Finn tilted his head, studying Jasper, then stretched out his arms. Jasper scooped him up, careful but sure, and Finn hugged him tight, a quiet trust in his grip. Reese watched, her chest aching with relief, love, something she couldn't name. They sat together, the 4 of them, Jasper holding Finn, Reese leaning against his shoulder, Grayson sprawled in a chair with a tired grin. Jasper spoke first, breaking the silence. "I owe you an apology, Reese. Firing you, doubting you, I messed up." She shook her head, squeezing his hand. "You didn't know. I lied to you, Jasper. I thought I'd lose everything if you found out." He turned to her, his gaze soft. "You didn't lose me. You gave me Finn, and you gave me you. That's more than I ever figured I'd get, allergy or not." Grayson piped up, yawning. "So, what's the plan, boss? You keeping me on, or am I out of a job now that you've got my sister?" Jasper laughed, shifting Finn in his lap. "You're staying, Grayson. Someone's got to keep SkyTech running while I figure out this dad thing." Grayson smirked. "Deal? But you're paying for Finn's college, rich guy." Reese elbowed him, grinning. "Shut it, Gray. We've got time to sort that out." The next day, news of Serena's arrest hit the tabloids. Her mugshot splashed across every site in New York. Preston Langley's empire took a hit, deals collapsing as SkyTech severed ties. Eleanor Vaughn, Jasper's grandmother, called from her upstate estate, her voice crackling through the phone. "Jasper, darling," she said, I heard about the wedding. That Langley girl's a disgrace. But this Reese, she's got grit. Bring her up here soon, and the boy too." Jasper smiled, glancing at Reese across the kitchen where she flipped pancakes for Finn. "Will do, Gran. She's family now." Weeks passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Jasper moved Reese and Finn into his Manhattan loft, a sprawling space with views of the skyline. Finn's treatments continued, funded by SkyTech's insurance, his allergy a mirror of Jasper's but manageable with care. Reese traded her cap for her own clothes, her hair loose, her laugh freer. She and Jasper talked late into the nights, piecing together that lost evening 5 years ago, a fluke of fate that bound them before they knew it. He told her about the bracelet, how he'd kept it like a talisman, hoping for answers. She told him about Finn's birth, the fear, the fight to keep him safe, alone. One evening they stood on the balcony, Finn asleep inside, the city humming below. Jasper wrapped an arm around Reese, pulling her close. "You know," he said, "I spent years thinking I'd never touch anyone without crashing. Then you walked in, and it all changed." Reese leaned into him, smiling. "Guess I'm your exception." He kissed her forehead, soft and sure. "More than that, you're my everything." The stars glittered above, and in the quiet Reese felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by something solid, real. Finn's laugh echoed from a dream inside. Grayson's snores rumbled from the guest room, and Jasper's warmth anchored her. 5 years of secrets, disguises, and near misses had led them here, a family forged in the chaos, stronger for it. The bracelets on their wrists gleamed, a match set, a promise kept at last.